Has this ever happened to you? Someone looks you in the eyes, shakes their head ever so slightly, and with a single word, dismisses all that you thought you were. Rejected, cast aside, left to stand alone while the ground beneath you seems to vanish. In that moment, every fiber of the human ego screams for validation, for repair, for a hand to reach back. Yet what if that hand never comes? What if rejection is not the breaking, but the unmasking, the unveiling of what you were meant to become? The ancients knew that rejection was not a death sentence, but a forge. Seneca spoke of fire as the testing of gold, and men as tested by misfortune. When the heart feels unwanted, the psyche reveals its fractures. The child within who still longs for unconditional acceptance, the shadow self who seethes with unspoken rage, the proud mask that trembles when stripped of applause. This is why rejection cuts so deeply. It is not only the other's dismissal we confront, but our own buried wounds, the raw places within us that cry out, "Am I enough?" And yet, this wound is not the end. It is the beginning. For rejection, when viewed through the eyes of the Stoic, is the supreme alchemy. It is the sculptor's chisel, removing what is not essential. It strips away illusions, leaves the man bare, and asks the only question that truly matters. Will you define yourself by another's fleeting approval, or by the unshakable empire of your own soul? Imagine the battlefield of the inner world. At one corner stands desire, the desperate urge to be chosen, to be seen. At the other, fear, the terror of abandonment, of being invisible. Between them, the self is torn like a rope in war. But the Stoic warrior steps into the center, not with weapons of pleading or anger, but with silence, with stillness, with the unyielding gaze that says, "You may deny me, but you cannot unmake me." This is the ultimate comeback, not loud, not vengeful, but eternal. The transformation of pain into presence. Modern psychology gives us another language for this ancient drama. Jung saw rejection as projections collapse, the fantasy of the perfect other shattered, revealing the parts of the psyche we refused to own. What we thought lived in their hands was always hidden in ours. The lover's refusal, the employer's dismissal, the friend's betrayal. Each is a mirror cracking, and in those shards we see not only their choice, but our hidden truth. That truth is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also liberating, because what you thought was lost was never yours. It was always your shadow, demanding integration. Think of it this way. Rejection is not the world saying, "You are not enough." It is the world whispering, "Return to yourself." The sting you feel, it is not fatal, it is fuel. It is the ache of muscles being stretched into new form. Like an athlete breaking through limits, your spirit strains against despair so that it may rise into resilience. Every no from the outside, when met with discipline within, becomes the silent hammer that forges a soul capable of withstanding the storms of life. And what storms they are. To live is to invite rejection, for no man or woman is universally adored. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, was slandered, misunderstood, and despised by those who could not grasp the depth of his soul. Did he collapse beneath their disapproval? No. He turned inward, into the citadel no enemy could breach. He wrote to himself, "It is not things that trouble us, but our judgments about them." So too must you write your own decree. Rejection is not my death, it is my awakening. But let us not pretend this is easy. The wound of rejection bleeds through generations. In that moment of dismissal, you feel not only today's pain, but the echo of every time you were overlooked, every time love withheld itself. The psyche collapses into a spiral. What if I am unlovable? What if I am unworthy? Yet here is where the Stoic stands apart. By refusing to collapse into fantasy, he does not chase the fleeing shadow, nor curse the storm. He remains, still, upright, alive. And in that refusal to crumble, he becomes more than man. He becomes monument. This is the essence of the comeback. Not revenge against the one who turned away, but victory over the inner tyrant who once demanded their approval. Rejection loses its power when you no longer beg for its reversal. It becomes instead the soil from which your independence blooms. Like a tree battered by winds, roots forced deeper into the earth, you rise not in spite of rejection, but because of it. Stronger, truer, untouchable. And so the paradox unfolds. The greatest rejection becomes the doorway to your greatest triumph. For when the world says no, the soul that answers with yes to itself has already won. Rejection, once embraced, reveals its secret power. It is not a wall, but a mirror. In its cold surface, you see the reflection of your truest fears, the fear of being unseen, unheard, unloved. This mirror does not flatter, it does not soften, it exposes. But in exposure lies opportunity, for only what is seen can be transformed. The rejected man who refuses to look away from that reflection becomes the man who conquers not others, but himself. The Stoics would have called this the discipline of perception. You do not control who accepts you, nor who walks away, but you do control the meaning you assign to their leaving. Do you see rejection as evidence of your inadequacy, or as a necessary pruning of the soul's path, removing that which no longer belongs? The modern psyche, conditioned by endless validation, collapses at the slightest withdrawal of attention. Yet the ancient psyche, trained in discipline, rises taller in the face of absence. For absence, too, can be a teacher. It teaches that your worth was never tied to their gaze. Picture the archetype of the exiled king. Stripped of throne and crown, he wanders the wilderness alone. At first he weeps, for the people who once bowed now pass him by as though he were invisible. But then, in the silence of the forest, he discovers what the throne had hidden, that power does not reside in ornaments, but in the spine that remains unbent when the ornaments fall away. Every man who faces rejection carries within him this same king. You too may be dethroned by love lost, by opportunities denied, by doors slammed shut. But you are not dethroned from your own command unless you abdicate willingly. Jung would call this exile a confrontation with the shadow, that which you have denied, your insecurity, your hunger for approval, your fear of abandonment emerges with teeth bared when rejection strikes. Many run from this beast, attempting to numb it with distraction, vengeance, or desperate attempts to win back affection. But the one who dares to face the shadow, to let its howl reverberate through the caverns of the psyche, finds that it cannot kill him. On the contrary, he learns to tame it. He learns that strength is not the absence of wounds, but the mastery of them. Consider, too, the paradox of silence. When you are rejected, the impulse is to speak louder, to protest, to prove. But the Stoic path urges stillness. In silence, you withdraw the power you once gave away. The one who rejected you expects you to beg, to argue, to fight for entry back into their approval. But when you stand still, when your eyes remain unshaken, when your presence says, "I have no need to persuade you of my worth," something remarkable happens. The rejection loses its grip, for it can no longer define you. This silence is not weakness, it is sovereignty. Yet let us be honest, Sovereignty is not born in comfort. It is birthed in the pain of solitude. The nights when you lie awake, rehearsing words you never said, or imagining outcomes that will never arrive. In those nights, the temptation to spiral is immense. But these are the nights when the soul learns endurance. They are the forge fires in which character is tempered. You may think you are breaking, but in truth, you are being reforged. The blade does not shine until it has endured the flame. This is why rejection, though bitter, is secretly sacred. It delivers you back to yourself. Every no you endure strips away dependency until what remains is the essence of who you are, unadorned, unshakable. No Stoic ever promised that life would grant universal acceptance. What they promised was that life's refusals could become your deepest triumph, if you dared to let them. For in learning to be rejected and remain whole, you achieve something rarer than applause. You achieve freedom. Rejection does not end with the silence of another. It echoes inside the chambers of your own mind. That echo, if left unchecked, becomes a tyrant. It whispers lies. You are unworthy. You are invisible. You will never be chosen. Many collapse under this inner voice, mistaking it for truth. But what if rejection is not a verdict, but a test? What if the voice is not an enemy, but a challenge, daring you to claim your own authority? The Stoics teach that no external force has dominion over your soul unless you hand them the keys. To be rejected, then, is not to be diminished, but to be invited to reclaim what was always yours: the power of interpretation, the sovereignty of meaning, the dignity of presence. You cannot control another's choice, but you can control whether that choice defines you. This is the razor's edge, where weakness falls and strength is born. Archetypally, rejection is death and rebirth. It is the collapse of one identity and the emergence of another. The rejected lover dies. The self-governing individual rises. The dismissed applicant falls. The resilient creator awakens. Like the mythic phoenix, you are reduced to ash, not to vanish, but to rise incandescent. This is why those who endure rejection with courage radiate a strange magnetism. They embody renewal. They show others that survival is not enough. Transformation is possible. Psychology confirms what myth already knew. Rejection activates the same brain centers as physical pain. The wound is real. But unlike a bodily cut, this wound does not heal with time alone. It demands meaning. Left untreated, it festers into bitterness. But faced directly, it becomes the portal to individuation, the process by which you separate from illusions and step into authentic selfhood. You are no longer the echo of others' approval. You are whole, even in silence. Picture the Stoic man standing at the city gates as the crowd turns its back. Dust gathers on his cloak. The voices fade into the distance, yet he does not chase them. He does not beg. He simply stands. Stillness becomes his rebellion, silence his ultimate reply. For what is stronger, the one who scrambles to regain favor, or the one who stands rooted in his essence, untouchable? That is the Stoic comeback. Not words, not revenge, but presence. The presence of one who knows rejection cannot take what it never gave, your worth. And here lies the paradox. Rejection is often the highest compliment, for it reveals that you no longer fit the confines of where you once stood. A door closes because your path must lead elsewhere. You are not discarded, you are redirected. Yet this redirection feels, at first, like loss. Only later, when you have walked far enough, do you see it for what it truly was: protection, preparation, a sacred unveiling. So, when rejection stings, ask yourself, what is this loss trying to carve away? What dependency is being stripped from me? What version of myself is being invited to die, so that a truer one may live? These questions turn rejection from wound into wisdom, from exile into initiation. You may feel abandoned, but you are, in fact, being initiated into the rare fraternity of those who no longer require applause to stand tall. The comeback, then, is not an act of defiance against the rejecter. It is an act of liberation from the need to be chosen at all. And in that liberation, you discover the most dangerous and beautiful truth. When you no longer beg to be accepted, you become impossible to reject. Rejection carves deep lines into the soul because it strikes at the most primal hunger, belonging. From the first cry of infancy, the human psyche is wired to seek acceptance, to find safety in the gaze of another. When that gaze turns away, the old wound reopens. This is why rejection feels larger than the moment. It carries the weight of every dismissal, every silence, every absence that came before. To meet rejection, then, is to face not just the present, but the entire history of one's unhealed need. And yet, within this truth lies the seed of transcendence. For if rejection exposes the hunger, it also reveals the path beyond it. To see the wound is to know where to heal. To feel the ache is to sense the chains you are meant to break. The Stoic path does not deny the sting, it transforms it. Epictetus reminded his students, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In rejection, the untrained man reacts with collapse, but the disciplined man responds with reclamation. He claims his own worth, independent of the verdict of others. Archetypally, rejection is the descent into the underworld. Like Orpheus searching for Eurydice, you enter the shadows, uncertain if you will emerge intact. The underworld is filled with voices of doubt, phantoms of inadequacy, specters of shame. To descend is terrifying. Yet those who endure the descent discover the treasure hidden there, the unshakable truth that your value does not depend on being chosen. You become like the hero who returns from the underworld, not empty-handed, but carrying fire. In Jungian language, this is individuation, the process by which you separate your true self from the false identities that craved applause. Individuation demands the death of illusion, the illusion that others must complete you, the illusion that their approval defines your existence. Rejection forces this death. It strips away every mask until the only face that remains is the one you must learn to love without condition. This is the face of sovereignty. The Stoics would call this sovereignty freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of need, freedom from the enslavement of external validation. And freedom, once grasped, is more intoxicating than any acceptance could ever be. For when you stand in freedom, you no longer beg to be chosen. You choose. You choose where to walk, whom to honor, what to build, without fear of dismissal. The one who rejects you loses their power. The one who accepts you no longer controls your peace. You are free, and that freedom is triumph. This is why the ultimate comeback is not loud. It is not a grand gesture to win back those who turned away. It is quiet, steady, relentless growth. It is the refusal to let rejection scar you into bitterness. Instead, you become larger than the wound. You embody resilience so fully that rejection becomes irrelevant. Those who once dismissed you may look again and wonder how you rose so high without them. But you do not rise for them. You rise because your spirit demands it. And so rejection, once enemy, becomes ally. It teaches what acceptance never could, that you are whole, even when unseen. That you are powerful, even when unchosen. That you are destined, not because others point and declare it, but because you have claimed it in the silence of your own heart. The comeback is not a return to where you were before rejection. It is an ascension to where you never could have gone without it. Rejection is a paradoxical gift, for it compels you to build what no one can take, inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius called it a fortress within, impenetrable, self-sufficient, a place where no insult, dismissal, or abandonment could breach unless you opened the gate. Each rejection you endure teaches you to reinforce these walls, not with arrogance, but with self-knowledge. The man who has been stripped of approval, yet still breathes calmly, is the man who can never again be enslaved by it. Psychology tells us this transformation mirrors the breaking of old neural pathways. Each time you resist the urge to chase acceptance, you weaken the chain of dependency. Each time you face the ache without collapse, you carve new grooves of resilience into the mind. Over time, rejection ceases to be a dagger. It becomes a familiar weight, something carried with dignity rather than dread. You no longer fear it because you no longer define yourself by it. What once pierced you now strengthens you. In myth, heroes often return from rejection greater than when they departed. Odysseus, spurned by gods and cast adrift, emerges not only as survivor, but as sovereign of his fate. So too, the rejected soul who endures without begging returns to the world with a gravity others cannot explain. There is a mystery in those who have faced the abyss and did not crumble, a mystery that draws others in. Ironically, the moment you stop grasping for acceptance is often the moment acceptance seeks you, drawn by the magnetism of your unshaken core. But this magnetism is not the goal. The true triumph is subtler, quieter. It is waking up unburdened by the need for permission to exist. It is walking into a room without bending your posture to win approval. It is choosing your words because they are true, not because they are pleasing. This is freedom, and it cannot be bought, borrowed, or gifted. It must be forged in the fires of rejection. The Stoic comeback is not measured by the silence of your enemies or the return of those who left. It is measured by the silence within you, the absence of turmoil where once there was longing. The quiet strength of a soul no longer tossed by the waves of validation. To stand in that stillness is to realize you have turned the most feared of experiences into your most unshakable triumph. For rejection, when transmuted, is no longer a cage. It is a doorway. And beyond that doorway lies the life where you do not chase, you do not beg, you do not fear. You choose.